Well, guys, I usually say that a week flies by, but oh my God, what about a fortnight just going like that? So here we have Frank's back. I'm really looking forward to this second half of our interview, Frank. What about, we were getting towards beginning to talk about COVID. And the reason I get into this, again, without getting into the depth of that again, it was because of COVID. And in fact, the playlist I've got in my YouTube channel is the COVID series. So tell us a wee bit from maybe generally how astrologers are looking at COVID, and then maybe your own particular slant on it, if you like, or anything else you want to share about it. That would be great.
Thanks, Jack. Like everybody, most of us, I don't think I anticipated the extent or the length, the duration of how it's been. I was in China in January. Wow. teaching for my school, and got very sick. And all of a sudden, I thought I was patient zero, as only maybe an Aries could feel that way. But I got very sick. I don't think it was COVID from the symptoms and everything else. I just had a heavy flu. So when I got back, the news of it spreading, I was in Australia as well, and it all started, the news was building in January, as early as that. Astrologically, 3 planets joined up for the first time in a number of years, Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto. And a few astrologers wrote about epidemics, viruses, the possibility of that. But most of us didn't. I think the idea that astrologers are sitting around thinking and predicting what it's going to be, most of us tend to reflect on the news, and we'll tend to discuss and talk about it on social media about what is happening right now. Some astrologers want to be the one who predicts everything, but most of us, I think, sit back and try to give an astrological perspective on it. It's a triple conjunction that really has enveloped the whole year. I was in Turkey last year, about 18 months ago, and then I did a very glamorous photo shoot for Hello magazine, interestingly. And at the end of the year, they asked me for a year ahead. And I called the year ahead, tough start, good finish, meaning 2020, of course, because it was written about November of last year, 2019. And really what I explained was that there were a huge amount of changes in the way that the world is working. I didn't know exactly. I tried to look at the symbolism of it. But I said that at the end of the year, with the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius, is the breath of fresh air. And the interesting thing about the whole year has been...
Interesting phrase, breath of fresh air.
Well, that's it, because the theme of the year has been about I can't breathe. With the Black Lives Matter movement, the awareness of that, the lack of air astrologically, the air signs are Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. So there's been practically no air in the chart all year. And we have a major air conjunction on the 21st of December. So to me, this year is going to be, how do we negotiate things that appear to be beyond our control? In astrology, Pluto is the planet that's non-negotiable. I call it the godfather. It makes you an offer you can't resist. It's one of those qualities in astrology where if we have a Pluto experience, it's often something that all we can do is to connect to what it means to us and not able to necessarily negotiate with the larger things that it's impacting. So most of us, I think, a lot of astrologers at least, saw this year as a tough year of having to wade through some of the most difficult times, but with the idea that the end of the year begins this breath of fresh air, this sense of freedom. And Capricorn is a sign that's all about, this is where the 3 planets have been all year. It's a sign that is about responsibilities, about patriarchy, hierarchies, all the different levels of government and procedure. And these are things that have been crumbling for some time, since 2008, when Pluto moved into Capricorn. And it really won't it will continue to crumble whether it's the different royal families, whether it's different institutions like the BBC and everything, all the different establishments around the world, they're still undergoing the Pluto transformation up until about 2024. But this year promises, with the beginning of Jupiter Saturn in Aquarius, promises a sense of we can get back to focusing on what's important for us as a community, all our little communities. The temptation is to divide. And the temptation already is, you must have seen this with teenagers, and this is nothing against the millennials, because I think they'll be the people that really take us to the new level. But have you seen teenagers sit there with their phones, tapping away, and they're in the same room, but they're talking to each other? Yes. Now that's typical of what we're in right now. And I think COVID has made that extreme. We're now not even able, people tap elbows and stuff like that. Aquarius is a sign of being interested in the group, but being separate from them as well. So there's a quality of that that's really interesting. So this year has been about how do we negotiate things that appear to be non-negotiable. And going back to what we said in the first discussion 2 weeks ago, was that whatever, we can get mad at people, we can blame it on Boris, we can blame it on Trump, we can blame it on the Chinese, and that really does nothing for our own personal development, and it does nothing to be angry. And I think, again, this is a sweeping generalization, but the anger that we're seeing, the defiance from people, and people are absolutely free to believe whatever they want to believe, of course, but there's a lot of anger that's directed at authorities, at whatever, that is better served being directed towards changing your own life. And, we know that if you don't do something, depression and anger come in, that sense of feeling not in control of your own destiny. And this period where I've had a few personal losses. I had a very close friend of mine, take his own life at the beginning of COVID. You realize that ultimately you can sit there being angry at everybody else, or you can understand this as a period to pause. And it's a period to go in, to understand your deeper purpose, find a way around. It's a bit like a snakes and ladders game. That's the image that just popped into my head. We know sometimes when we land on something, it's going to take us up. And other times, after all the hard work of getting there, one of the big snakes are going to take us down. And if we go down again, what do? Do we give up the game? Well, I don't think life really, we can choose, as my friend did, to give up the game. We can choose that. Or we can choose to keep playing. And the choice when we keep playing is, do we get angry at everybody because we're now down at 13 when we were up at 43 a few minutes ago? Or do we realize that actually it needs a different approach? And what we're doing this year, I think, is being invited, again, that idea of an invitation. And I'm not Pollyanna, I don't think everything is wonderful, but I do realize that anything we go through, our response to it, as you well know, our approach to it defines how it affects us, defines whether we go forward, whether we stay still, or whether we go backwards, or whether we give up. And so I think this period has been a great one of insight into understanding how you deal with things you can't control. And life is full of those. Yeah. And of course, the great mantra about, for the alcoholics and everybody else, the idea of knowing what you can control, knowing what you can't, and having the wisdom to know the difference is important. But also the idea that knowing what you don't want to put up with and what you need to change is also important, what you can no longer tolerate in your life. So this year has been a reminder, a slow one, where to get angry at the system is okay. We can get angry, we can vote differently, we can do all sorts of things out there with our community, but we can also understand that ultimately the decision to have a better life rests with us, if we've got the perception. But you know what I'm realizing is that we know that 80% of the population in the world don't have the luxury to sit around to think about astrology, to think about mind store, to think about changing their life. They're just literally dealing with with emergency situations like food and water. The fact that I've been born into a situation where I'm in the privileged few in a society that allows me some freedom to learn the subjects I want to me is almost like I've signed up for this, do as much as I can, rather than be engaged in the negative or be engaged in the, oh, not for me. I'm not going to do that. Why should I bother?
Yeah, fantastic, fantastic. So when you and the rest of the astrologers that you frequent or whatever, are they hopeful that this particular pandemic is waning? I mean, I noticed overnight, I read something this morning I'm sure it was the Guardian, where even though there's all this talk of it rising, actually they're thinking it's already turned, which was interesting to read that, which, given what you're saying about we get to the turn of the year and there's this breath of fresh air, that's maybe quite exciting and hopeful. But what did the guys think? Did they think it's going to sort of wane away, or is there another big sort of push before it does, or what do you think?
My feeling, and I haven't been studying it, some astrologers that's been their life in the last 6 to 8 months, and I've been listening, but I just haven't. I've been busy as well doing other things.
Yeah.
I think some of the opinion is that November may see a peak and then a death of it, a slow death. But then again, different countries are dealing with it in different ways. I'm going to Germany. I'm probably in Germany as we're speaking when you broadcast this, and they got that sorted. From what I hear, they got that nailed on the head, as good Germans do, you know, with how they organized it. And so when I'm going there, I imagine it'll be quite a different experience from being in America, for instance, where there seems to be different ways of dealing with it, or slower ways of dealing with it. So my feeling is that the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction on the 21st of December will see an opening of the doors, or freedom to some extent, but there will be people, as always, who are behind that. America's chart is relatively filled with one disaster after the next for the next 2 or 3 years in terms of economically for America. So I think even though there was talk in the last year about China having difficulties, to me, China is growing strengthening, growing, developing. America, whoever they elect, is going through what I wrote some years ago, I think is a period of economic frostbite, which we're all having obviously this year, but it will go to a point where it's on the brink of bankruptcy on a number of different levels. And that's because America's having what we call its Pluto return in a few years from now, and it's leading up to that. And the decisions made in America, without getting too political right now, I've learned over the years, when I go to America, I don't tell them what I think about their country, you know, or about their leaders. You know, you don't have the arrogance to go in and talk about. So I never talk about countries that I'm in. But my feeling is that whoever is elected over the coming in the coming weeks, it is leading to a state of crisis. One of the great things about the Saturn-Pluto-Jupiter conjunction of 2020, that's lasted pretty much all year, is it's the death of the old guard. Now, I didn't watch the first presidential debate. I didn't want to see it, because it's not that I want to be sitting in ignorance away from it. I remember seeing the Trump-Hillary one, and that made me feel sick. And I didn't want to repeat that. But what's interesting is that they felt, from the pictures I saw on social media, like two dinosaurs.
Absolutely. I watched it. It was shocking.
Okay. Well, what's interesting is that we've got a very Uranian, they've got a very Uranian president in America that is here to wake us all up. And you can get involved in the, we hate this, we love this, whatever it may be, but you're getting involved in something instead of standing back and realizing what it's saying about you, or what you need to do in your life. And we can say it's the system, it's Trump, it's Boris, whoever, and then get too wrapped up to find a solution to having a better year, having a better life. Yeah. So it's easy for me to say, I know I'm just sort of summing it up quickly, but the watching the debate, what I realize is that both the planet Saturn and the sign of Capricorn are quote unquote feminine.
Right.
I know we're moving away from binary at the moment in lots of different ways, of course, but they're both feminine. And when I saw or heard of the burning of Notre Dame, which is what, over a year ago from now,
Yeah.
the beginning of this Saturn Pluto cycle, my feeling was that, you know, it's really the death of, it's the beginning of the death of the old male dinosaurs in politics, in the world, and it's the growth of more of a feminine approach, whether that's men doing the feminine uh, um, left, I want to say right brain, the feminine right brain approach, whether it's women attaining power, but it's really the beginning of recognizing that the men in the dinosaurs are screwing it up. And you know what happened with the dinosaurs? They had to, you know, something had to kill them all off before something else was born.
You know, it's fascinating. By the time people watch this, 2 weeks' time from the first one, maybe the second debate will be on where the feminine vice president runner alongside, is it Guy Pence, I think his name is, the president, vice president. There's going to be a debate between them. That's going to be very interesting because I watched it, the whole thing, and it was shocking. You're exactly right. It was like dinosaurs knocking their heads together. One being knocking harder than the other, but it was just like, what is this? So embarrassing for the world that that's what was represented.
Well, I don't live in New Zealand, and you know,
No.
wherever you live, if you don't live in a country, you don't really get a sense of what it's like to live, earn, and pay taxes there, of course. But you know, in New Zealand, they have a female head,
Yeah.
and she's doing things very differently.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether it's brilliant or not. I can't honestly say. But from what I hear, more of a woman's approach, or at least a right brain approach to the world,
Yeah.
is what we're needing. And I think this is part of what's being killed off this year. It's going to take a while, I think, but we'll look back and think those were the years when the dinosaurs were running the asylum.
Yeah.
And
I think taking the point. I mean, if you step back from the politics of it, and we maybe do take what you're saying, and we watch that next debate. So there's a woman with a dinosaur, perhaps looks like he's a dinosaur. Could that? It'll be interesting to see what happens there. Just to observe it, from given what you've said, that's going to be amazing. And one woman and 3 guys in the mix, and these older guys with the suits and stuff. So that's really encouraging, Frank. That's fading away. It might be quite tough as it breaks down, but it is encouraging. Yeah.
Well, I remember. I don't think it's fading away just yet, and I think it needs to get, with the next election, I think it's going to get to such an extreme that there's no other way forward. Yeah. So I think people need to usually be pushed to the edge before they say no more, or over the edge. And I remember a psychic on YouTube 4 years ago, or 5 years ago probably, saying there's no way Trump will win because it's time for the feminine energy. And I thought, don't discount the ability of the old guard to still cling on and to be able to win and to bully, etc. And we saw that with the presidential debate of him looming behind Hillary, and it was very interesting to watch. And I think since then, women have been turning around at the men looming over them and saying, this is unacceptable, time's up, me too. That's changed since then, really. And Hillary was at the wrong place, wrong time, probably of the old guard, of the old set of dinosaurs, perhaps as well, from that. But in a sense, since then, I imagine some of the women coming up as well would turn around and address that in a different way, and not ignore it like Hillary did 4 years ago. I just think there's a different way of not putting up with things or addressing problems these days.
Yeah, it was interesting to use the word bully. I mean, I think I kept saying that to Laura as we were watching it. A big bullying thing going on here. It was amazing. But anyway, that's my view. People might have a different view, and they're entitled to it, of course. So the period of change as this thing crumbles or comes to a point where enough's enough and we need to absolutely do something. Is that over 2 or 3 years ahead, do you think, or is it longer or shorter? Or
It is. It's Pluto moves into Aquarius in 2023 and pops back into Capricorn for a bit. It's not really till 2024 that the big change socially. Now, I'm not a blind optimist where I think the world changes. I remember when Neptune moved into Pisces back in 2011, 2012, around that period, everyone's saying it's going to be a more spiritual time. The cynic in me thought, where there's more spirituality, there are more people selling, abusing, using, abusing, accusing, and using manipulation. And I remember writing an essay about this, the period that we're living in now, back in 2010, saying that the great deception of the next period would be about people's information and being able to psychically, because Pisces is all about intuition and psychic, but to be able to guess. So you just speak into your computer the word India 3 times and you'll have a Facebook message pop up inviting you to explore going to India for 2 weeks or Goa or somewhere. And that's where we're being manipulated. I know there's lots of talk about in the moment with the new Netflix documentary about that I watched the other day. I was left feeling, okay, from it. But it interests me. I think the real manipulation these days is the last time Neptune was in Pisces, it was the birth of spiritualism, but also the birth of people with ectoplasm rocking the table with their leg, pretending and deceiving people out of money too. So it was always both. Now I've seen some amazing, Gordon Smith, born in Glasgow himself, what an amazing, amazing psychic. Tremendous psyche. And I've seen people who do a bit of the chair rocking and the ectoplasm on some extent. So wherever you go, whatever you're looking at, there's always going to be people taking advantage of the times. So it's spiritual times, but it's also how do we sell that or deceive people into thinking whatever. So we've now got a lot of fake news and we've got things that we can't believe anymore. So it's always in both ways, I think.
Well, that interestingly takes us to, I think, a wonderful topic, because we're all going through change, constant change anyway, and we're seeing this global thing going, these planets lining up. That means that each of us have to make our own decisions, inevitably, all sorts of stuff, whether, and doing all we can to have enlightened decisions based on finding as much information as we can, not necessarily trusting the mainstream, because as we know, it's very often not the truth. And one of the things that I was working with people back when we started this journey was people to use Mindster techniques to make decisions. You know, should I buy this book? Should I go in that journey? You know, stuff that people are doing all the time, but could they trust their intuition? That's been a big part of Mindster, huge. One of the big courses I finally taught was called Whispers with Giants, and it was very, very popular. And that was the inner conversations with inner coaches, or, you know, guides, or whatever you want to call them, or as I call it, source. But one of the great things that you guys are now helping people with is tarot. And I found tarot to be, you know, I messed about with it for a long time, maybe about 30 years. I remember getting my first pack 30 years ago. I've been frightened from it. And I sat with, I was brought up Catholic, and the Catholic priest, there was an older guy and a younger guy, and he just came suddenly and knocked our door. And my wife back then, she wasn't Catholic, and I wasn't really going. I occasionally went, and he just appeared one day, and I'm like, oh my God, the priest! When he comes into the house, and make him a cup of tea and stuff, and I just bought my first tarot cards, and I was a wee bit frightened of them because of some of the. As a Catholic, and maybe a Christian, you're getting this stuff about this stuff being evil, if you know what I mean. And I remember saying to him, you know, do you mind if I ask you a question, Father? I've got these tarot cards, and I'm really quite excited about what they might be able to help me with. What do you think about it? And I kind of half expected him to say, oh, get them out of here, and, you know, start blessing himself and holy water at me and stuff. in fact, he said they're fantastic. It's like, whoa. And it gave, as stupid as a young man, it gave me permission to play with it. Play with it's the wrong word. I never mess about with it. It's like I only go to it if I've got a major decision. But I think if you could talk about, because we are going to have to increasingly trust the sources that we're going to for information to make informed decisions. And obviously, the world is in massive change. And again, going back to the longevity thing, we can't just retire at 65 and get in a box. You could be living for 30 years and longer, with purpose and many different phases over that period. Tell us a bit about tarot, how you found your way to that, why it's important to you, why you maybe think it links well with all sorts of things just now in the Zeitgeist, and of course astrology. That would help. Give us a wee bit about tarot, Frank. I'm really looking forward to hearing what you've got to say about it.
Oh, well, thank you. I remember the woman who taught me palmistry many years ago. She would do local fairs, and all the clergy, the priests, different people would queue up and have their palm read, and they were fascinated, and they'd come for private consultation. So it's not always mutually exclusive, and it's not always the devil's work in people's mind either. I think whatever you use, if I used iridology and examined people's irises, if I could do that, I would as well. And I think any information you get from the hands, even the lines, the way that you hold the fingers, any of that, if that can give you information to inspire somebody to be more of who they were born to be, it's extremely useful. The irony is that subjects like tarot, palmistry, astrology, people think it's about taking away your free will. It's leaving it up to the devil's work or something that's not to do with you. Really, when it's done well, it's simply getting back in tune with who you are. The astrology has that sense because it's a map of your birth, that moment where the planets were, and astrologers don't really know why it works, whether it's a cosmic ray or influence. They don't really understand that, and people will say, well, the toaster gives you more rays than the planets. So astrologers don't really understand how it works. They just understand that using it as a symbolic language helps to enhance our understanding of who we are and the world around us. Palmistry is the same. Tarot, in a way, again, is a guide, and I think to a rational person, it feels incredibly random to pick up a card and for it to have meaning. But there's a randomness about life that gives us insight every single day. You go out into the world and you spot a number on a car that reminds you of somebody. You give them a ring, you give them a telephone call, and you're reconnected with them. They needed to hear from you then. You get a moment of insight to call somebody. Life is full of signs and symbols.
Right.
And if you're using the tarot card to manipulate people, if you're using it to make absolute decisions on your life that are not aligned to what you truly are, you're using it in the wrong way. You could, just like alcohol, and I don't mean to really make a connection, but you can use alcohol to celebrate, or you can use it as a crutch.
Yeah.
Same with anything. We can use anything in the world given to us. So tarot cards, I've had a few readings over the years. They've always been incredibly insightful. I've always had a sense that the person doing the reading for me is trying to do good for me, and is sincere with it. Whether they can read them better than somebody else, that's always a case with whatever translators or readers you have. Now, I don't know. I've never learned the tarot. I'm officially on the course. Haven't had a chance to sit down and catch up with the videos. So, but the feedback for the recent course that we're doing, and it's all pre-recorded plus live Q&As that we then have more live and Q&As. So we've had a few people join it after the course, and they're going to do the Q&As in February, etc. There's been tremendous feedback because, again, done the right way, a tarot card will simply, by turning it over or looking at them in a spread or in a Celtic cross, whatever you do with it, they'll give you insight to come back to what you need. And if you're somebody that's looking for a crutch, a guru, etc., then leave those alone. Leave those alone. If you're ready to make decisions and want a mirror to help you reflect on those, or to think about, to say, well, if I go ahead with this marriage or this company or this launch, what do I need to consider? Putting out a tarot card for that could be extremely useful.
Yeah.
Will he leave his wife and try to do that? That's maybe a common tarot question. That could give you insight, but a good tarot reader will say, actually, come back to you and say, how is this good for you? Are you depending too much on this? Are you depending too much on him? Are you making a decision? So a good tarot reader will use the cards not to say, yes, he'll leave her in a...
Oh, you're frozen.
to be wrong. I have a feeling you've gone,
Yeah.
you've frozen. Are you still there? Okay, great.
We froze for a moment. I don't know why.
Right, okay, great.
Yeah, so you were just getting to the point about, you know.
I thought you were very focused on that moment. So the the perils of live stuff. So when it's used well, it gives you a chance to reflect. If you're somebody that's looking for an excuse, a reason, an addiction, somebody else to tell you how to live, none of these subjects are going to be helpful.
No.
I had a client the other day come to see me, and she's a very bright young astrologer, and she'd listened to my courses online. She downloaded a few things and listened to it and got very excited with astrology, and she's moving very quickly. But she'd been working for I don't know what he was. He was sort of new age, somebody alternative practitioner. Built his website, helped him, promoted him in tremendous ways, and then discovered during the Me Too movement he'd been inappropriate with a lot of the people around him. And she'd lost a lot of faith in him, as you can imagine. And as we're talking, she's starting to build me up. Yeah. And I said to her, hang on a minute, you know, whatever I'm here to show you, to teach you, it's only going to come back to what you know and what you can do with it. So don't elevate me. I remember Maya Angelou, and I'm not comparing myself to Maya Angelou, but Maya Angelou would say, don't do that. Don't elevate me. Just, you know, do whatever you can learn from anybody, take with you, be hungry, grasp it as much as you can and run with it in your own direction. Don't try and be a carbon copy of anybody else or elevate somebody else to any position. It's never going to work. It's always going to be disappointment, whether that's disappointment towards the person you elevated, or a feeling of envy, or I'm never going to be as good at it. Never works out well. So any of these things, particularly tarot cards, where you're asking questions. With astrology, people don't ask me questions so much. It's more, here you are. What are you going to do? What are you going to do with these transits? It's not, will he leave his wife, or will I go bankrupt? It's more, what do you want to do in your life? Yeah. What do you want to do in this situation? But the tarot cards, yes, people do ask those questions, but a good tarot reader will go back and get to the psychology behind it and help the person in that way rather than predict something. That's my feeling, but they're very useful.
Yeah, I think for me, it's getting away from this notion that these are fortune-telling, predictive things. It's about context. You said it earlier on in the first interview. It's about context, isn't it? It's about understanding the dynamic and why the questions begin to form in your consciousness and what's around it. I think that, and that's why with tarot, it's not something I'm playing with at all. It's something I revere. It's like, okay, I'll go to it now. Might 6-8 months go by before I look at it again. And Laura's learning just now with this course you talked about, and it's absolutely fascinating. Interesting. Do you want to take a card? I say, no, I don't want to. I'm not in need of that just now, respecting it. But what is true, of course, is that she has had friends who are helping her, you know, by letting her, you know, them take cards and have a context. But it is amazing how accurate it is. It is amazing how accurate it is in terms of reflecting back. As you say, it's a mirror reflecting back the context. Then the person's got to make their own decision about it, but at least they're more informed. But tell us a wee bit about the course, because I suspect this is, if people came on looking, they knew I was going to be interviewing, and they're kind of, oh, maybe this will be fortune telling again. Well, it isn't. Clearly, it isn't. None of it has been the first interview of this. But what it is about is you can teach yourself this stuff. You can learn. You went into it yourself as a young boy, a young 16-year-old, whatever, and you put your head down, you studied. What we're all blessed with is from your experiences, you're helping people learn through the school. But tell us a bit about how maybe that tarot course is structured, so if people are thinking about it, they might want to go and do it. Even again, not to necessarily become a tarot reader, but for your own, to learn to understand it and use it. It's amazing. If you're gifted and you want to become a tarot reader, then well and good.
Well, tarot, like astrology, is tarot 78 cards.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to learn.
Yeah.
But what the course does, I gather, and I as I say, I need to catch up with some of the lessons myself, because I was determined to learn it this year, but life got in the way a bit. Yeah. They're all pre-recorded. It's about 18 to 20 hours of pre-recorded videos plus live Q&As, and the teacher, Mario, answers people's questions and works with them, the Q&As, etc. But there's a lot to learn, but it's divided up into suits. So you've got the swords, you've got the pentacles, you've got the different suits, the numbers as well. So there's some numerology in that as well. And from what I gather, it's done systematically as you're learning and you're working through and making connections. Tarot, like astrology, is full of life situations. So it's like people who pick up angel cards every day and pick up something, and it may give you a few words of wisdom or insight that you find useful for that day. I know a lot of people who study the tarot for the enjoyment of it, and they'll spend their time, every morning they pick out a card. Yeah. And they'll just observe it. They'll look at it at the end of the day to see how that's reflected. And they'll go from being on the sideline, just observing, to then understanding how to implement that during the day. So if it's a card or a symbol or an angel card, a tarot card that says have courage today, they'll start to watch that and develop it and realize today's the day for doing that. There are lots of different ways of using it, but I think the tarot, just as a moment in the morning or working with people for self-reflection, understanding how a situation can be presented well, to what to look out for, what to assess, what to be aware of, I think can be extremely helpful. Whether you're wanting to do it, a lot of the students who have signed up recently are astrologers who are adding it to their, and that's what I want to do. I wanted to be able to look at a chart, and as I'm talking to a client online, pick out a card for an immediate symbol or a few words to help them with that experience. Or even privately, if I'm having a conversation with you about business, I might draw up a card to just think, okay, I need to ask Jack about this, or what about the potential here? So use it, again, not as a crutch, but to use it as an opportunity to feel inspired, to get some meaning out of the day or the situation.
I mean, again, most people who are following me on this or joining in this are Mindstore members, for want of a word. People done courses, and they know how important coincidence is, or so-called coincidence, synchronicity, looking for the signs, as you say, in life. And one of the things I love about the tarot card, if you look at a tarot card, there is so much detail on it. There's hidden, unless you're really looking at it and studying it, you don't realize there's huge messages in there and synchronistic stuff. And that's the fascination of it. But, this is why I'd like people to maybe consider it for themselves, is because they know that I'm teaching all the time, or have been. You need to keep your eyes open for the signs on the road, especially if you're programming, to manifest something. You've got to let your subconscious or the source, come to your consciousness. Say, look at this sign. Be aware of this overheard conversation. What is that? You're just noticing that ad. And one of the things that happened, funnily enough, is if you think about it, the guys will remember this. We're looking at a screen, and I'm interviewing some different people, and one after the other, in the background, there is a painting of a line. Two separate people different parts of the world and a line. And you're like, whoa, how, we can't ignore that, guys. It could have been the equivalent of a tarot card. It's just an image on a screen and there's a line. And so it was like, well, what do lines mean? I see people go and look at animal totems. In other words, use these sources, ancient wisdom from different cultures. What can you read that? Can you reflect on that? And does it have any meaning in your life right now, particularly around your decision making? So this is why I would say, you guys, we all remember the lines. So I pointed them out. When I'm coaching people, like sometimes I do a synchronicity walk for a day with a client. They choose a location, they choose a day, different location, different things would happen. And my thing is to have the conversation with them, but all the time looking at what's going on and reflecting it. What do you think that cloud means? What do you think that bend in the road means? And then they reflect and so on. So to me, tarot cards allow you to do amazing things like that. And I would encourage, again, folks, have a good look at it. And again, going to Frank's site and stuff and look at that course might be calling at you, it might be screaming at you, come and do this. Maybe trust it. Yeah, and or the astrology. Maybe you're never going to become an astrologer, maybe you're going to become a tarot reader, but as a resource, both of these things and the palmistry, these are great resources.
Some of the students that may just turn up and do one term sometimes, I think go off, and if they've learned one thing, it's whatever else they read in the future is not as set, predestined, as black or white as they may have imagined. So, for example, just teaching somebody about the Mercury retrograde cycle, as we spoke about in the last meeting, they start to realize there are things that can be done there that can be negotiated, rather than feeling like, oh dear, it's awful. The first thing I do with a Mercury retrograde cycle is to back up all my work, first of all, to make sure I've got backups of backups and that I'm okay. And most of us survive these things. So my feeling is, to focus on, as you're saying, with the tarot and the palmistry, to use them as tools, but sometimes they're simply reminders that we don't need to be fearful of the unknown. Understanding these symbols, even if you take the astrology for one term only and never look at it again, the idea that you hear certain words from people, the idea that you see symbols of what they're wearing, the colors, the different things. We had a big student conference last weekend, and one of the tutors, Richard Swatton, who's a psychologist and an astrologer, he has a YouTube channel and different things, and he was teaching about training the astrological intuition and listening out for things. And so I was helping him with it. I was online, and we had about 400 people on it. It was a great event. And one of the students, and I'm very trusting of the universe, that when I say to somebody, let's get an example of somebody who wants their chart looked at, I trust the universe they're going to send us something that everybody can learn from. Not that we have to always be right, but the idea that they can learn from this person. And this woman gave her chart. So I typed it in for Richard. I put it up on the screen. We're all online, learning from him. And he's looking at the chart, and he's using his intuition, following symbols. And he's talking about, he even mentioned a stone and the color of the stone that would be great for her. We put the camera on, and she's literally wearing the stone around her neck, and everybody's laughing about it. And he's described one of her partners over the years. And again, we're given, whether it's a tarot card, a birth chart with all the symbols of the glyphs of the planets and the signs, we're given extraordinary archetypes, symbols, and myths that we can play with that will help us in whatever we want to do in our lives, whether have better relationships, whether it's to choose the right person to go into business with, be in the right field. And we don't have to get everything right immediately. Some people are scared of, what if I invest 5 years of my life in there and it ends after 5 years? Well, what a great 5 years that could be potentially, rather than the idea that you need something that's going to last for 20, 30 years. I think we live in societies where we expect, if we invest in something, it has to last a particular time, when life surely should be about having one eclectic experience after the next, and having a few months here, 6 months here. Whoever says it's a failure? And I always say to clients, nobody, unless you enjoy your work, nobody goes to their deathbed, sits on their deathbed wishing they spent more time working in things that they don't want to do. That's another thing. Yeah.
I mean, I often would stand on stages and say to people, life's like a sine wave. You get the great ups and you get great downs. And I mean, some of them will remember. I was launching a new course called The Island. I decided to put the House of the Red Roof away for a while, and I created this thing called The Island. And I had staff working for me, and I booked the concert hall in Glasgow. 1,000, maybe 1,200 people had booked to come at that point, and it was going to be huge. And there were still people queuing up. People had got on planes to come from Australia and so on to come and do this thing. And 2 days before it, I discovered that the staff who I was relying on had not booked it and had taken all the money. And I had to stand outside the concert hall in Glasgow, people turning up and saying, "I'm sorry, I can't teach it," because they won't let us in. It wasn't booked. And they looked at me as if I'd stolen all their money. And it was really the lowest point in my thing. And then what happened was a whole run-in legal. It cost me £100,000 and more in a legal case and stuff. Lost my database. My reputation was in the bin with a lot of people. They just believed I'd stolen the money. I hadn't. And I remember reaching out to astrology and finding out I was living in a Pluto line, and I was going through a Pluto transit, and it was explained to me, and I was in the depths of despair. In fact, I was about to just, go bankrupt, just voluntarily go bankrupt and just let it all go, because I'd lost all this money had gone, and I had no resource, I had no database. It was a nightmare. But then you sit with the astrologer and a tarot card, and what happens is that you realize this is just a transit. This changes. This, it's like people say, is it even this will pass?
Yeah.
And it was the confidence that, yes, this is really, really tough. Do you throw in the towel, or do you just stay a bit longer? Do you trust yourself in what you're teaching and what you know? Seek out these. And of course, that dreadful period in my life was one of the most amazing periods of life, because I learned so much. And again, going to astrology, realizing I had to get off the Pluto line. Where's the best place to go and live at that point? It was the south of France. And we had 7 amazing years living in the sunshine, and we were willing to go and live in a caravan because we had nothing in theory. It all just disappeared overnight. So again, this is why I say, understanding the transits and having faith that they will pass. And as again, coming to you to be one of your summer schools, was that, again, that big American guy standing there saying, you can choose how you respond to this transit. And that's basic mind store as well. It's like, where are you digging deep from to choose your decision? Amazing. So Frank, again, another hour's banging past. What's currently buzzing you? What's pressing your buttons in terms of your passions? What's currently going on that's exciting?
Probably non-astrological stuff, to be quite honest, because I'm finishing the online courses, so everything that we do in London is being put online. I've got to sit down and record a lot of those. We've got most of them done, so I'm wading through that. But I love music. I love film. I'm passionate about books and biographies and people, so things like that always interest me. I try to combine them. So I'm doing a talk in a few weeks' time online, and I'm going to be using some of the biographies that I I've been studying and etc. So people always interest me. But sometimes I get a good balance, as I'm sure you do as well. You spend a lot of time in front of people, and I'm the sort of person that wants to, I don't want to just phone in. I want to give 100% if I can, or close to if I can. And so when I retreat from that, I retreat to a home that's comfortable, that's usually quiet, in the sense that the phone goes off or the email goes off. So I try to have a good balance in that way. So I don't burn out. I don't get irritable with student demands and stuff. And for an Aries, I'm very patient with my students, because the people around me and the people I bought the school from all those years ago, I used to say to myself, if I get like that, I shouldn't teach anymore. Because if I get irritable and I get funny with people, and so I go into every new year, and we begin the new year always at the end of October, in London. The online is anytime, of course, but when I begin a new year at the LSA, I'm passionate, I'm excited about learning again. I've had July, August, September off, most of October off from doing that weekly teaching. So I'm re-inspired, and the new students, with their enthusiasm and their excitement about learning this, that inspires me too. So if I ever get to a point where I'm no longer interested, I'll hand it over to lots of other people, because I think I always wanted to be a teacher growing up. And it wasn't until a few years ago I realized I'd become one. I always thought I was an astrologer, I was a writer, I was this, I was that. And then I realized really at heart, I'm the teacher I always wanted to be. But I just do it on my own terms, and I teach a subject. I have different things you can find on your hand. Traditionally, there's a writer's fork on the hand, and there's a little square under the index finger that looks like a big sort of cross square, that's known as the teacher's square. But it's famously known as the ex-teacher's square, because anybody who's got it's usually taught people that don't want to learn in a school, and then they've gone into a subject that really inspires them, where they can inspire people who want to learn. And I've got that. I've never, luckily, didn't go through the teacher's bit of teaching, sixth form, and being thrown, banana peel thrown at me or eggs thrown at me. Never had any of that. But I've always had the fortune of being able to teach people who really want to learn. And that's fun. Who wouldn't want to do that?
Yeah, and I've been blessed with that as well. People turning up to my courses. It's an amazing thing. I'm so grateful for it. Frank, this has just flown by. Unbelievable. I enjoyed every single bit of it. Is there anything you want to leave the guys with to think about? A piece of wisdom, or even, do you want to just remind us how they get in touch with you? Would you just do that again?
Okay, thank you. Bit of wisdom first. Oh dear, I'm going to think of it after I say goodbye. Yes, I'm sure. Yes. But they have you, and you've been inspiring them for a long time. I think with astrology in particular, you buy into the idea that you learn about your sign, you learn about more things, your moon sign, your ascendant sign, all those things, and then you read some books that are very narrow. And say, we learn that Aries is told to in some books, told to stop being impatient, to slow down. Taurus is told to hurry up. Gemini is told to stop talking. Cancer is told to stop crying. And it's all nonsense, because we need to be who we are born to be.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to rush a Taurian. I'm not going to push a Taurian, definitely not push a bull. And let them go at their own pace. And I think the great tool of astrology, particularly when I'm looking at the charts of mums and dads who want to look at their child's chart, and I do that very carefully, because you have to be careful what you say to parents. And they get to a certain age where I say, they're 12 years old. No, let them read about it online. Don't have your mum checking out who you are, give them some privacy. But early, babies and children, sometimes I'll look at that in terms of what school to go to, or the type of education that would perhaps best fit their type of mind. Yeah. And it's always open, it's never only one way. But to encourage people to be who they are, rather than to be a stunted version of that or what the parents want them to be. That's the great gift of astrology, the great gift of any of these subjects, to get you back in touch with, as I said in the first part, what you signed up to do.
Yeah.
So that's really the key. What I would say in terms of promo and interest, there's lots of videos I have on the London, it's www.londonschoolofastrology.com. You just sign in to a free account, you can always sign out of it, and you get a load of videos on how we read charts, lots of different articles, lots of free things. And I would say to anybody who's interested in doing any courses, just sign up for anything that's free at the moment, have a read, have a listen, watch me do what I do.
Yeah.
And if it speaks to you, do it. If somebody else speaks to you, follow them.
Yeah.
And just go with what feels right at the right time, and invest in it if you feel ready to do something that truly speaks to you. I only want the students in there that want to learn from me and don't want them wasting their time or their money. That's what I always say to people. Find it and do it if you want to do it.
Fantastic, Frank. Absolutely fantastic. When this goes up, I'll let you know the first week and the second week. I'll let you, what's wonderful is that the way it works, I do this funky thing where I have a chat with the guys on live on a Wednesday night. Then I let them watch you and I having this conversation, and then I tail it with some, take a note of something that you've said, reflect it back to them. Then I've got other news I'm giving them. But they leave great comments, about appreciating the guest and so on. So I'll send you the links to that when it happens, and I'll send you the link to the YouTube channel if you want to go over this again. But the point is, it'll be there, and I suspect this is going to be another one of the. I keep saying they get better and better, but my God, this has been amazing. 2 weeks worth of material. So thanks, and I hope people take up the offer to even just to look at what you're doing, do some freebie stuff. But if you want to dive in, I tell you, it's money well spent, guys. Okay, so Frank, all the best.
Thank you, Jack. Thanks for your time, and appreciate having this chat and connecting with your group. Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, Frank. Take care now. Bye bye.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye bye.